The journey to the first English house. I never expected a simple research project to take me on a journey through time. But that's exactly what happened. It all started when I moved into a cozy little cottage in the English countryside. The house had thick stone walls, a thatched roof, and wooden beams that looked like they had been there for centuries. I found myself wondering, where did the English house truly come from? One rainy afternoon, I sat by the fireplace with a cup of tea, flipping through an old book on English architecture. That's when I discovered something fascinating. The English house didn't just appear overnight, it had evolved over thousands of years. I imagined myself traveling back in time, watching as the first houses were built. Thousands of years ago, during the Stone Age, people lived in simple huts made of wood and animal skins. These early homes were round, built to withstand the harsh weather. Then, in the Bronze and Iron Ages, houses became stronger, using wattle and daub, woven sticks covered with mud to create walls. As I turned the pages of my book, I saw how the Romans changed everything when they arrived in England. They built grand villas with stone walls, heated floors, and even glass windows. But when the Romans left, the Anglo-Saxons built simpler wooden homes, often with thatched roofs like the one I now lived under. The story of the English house didn't stop there. During the medieval period, great timber-framed houses appeared, like the ones in fairy tales. Some had huge fireplaces where families would gather to keep warm. The grandest homes built by wealthy lords had thick stone walls to protect against enemies. I could almost hear the echoes of knights and kings discussing their plans by candlelight. As the centuries passed, houses became more comfortable. The Tudors added their famous black and white timbered houses. The Georgians loved big windows and elegant brick designs, and the Victorians introduced plumbing and gas lamps. By the time I closed my book, the rain had stopped and the sun was peeking through the clouds. I stepped outside and looked at my little house. It suddenly felt like more than just a place to live. It was part of a long and incredible history, a story of how people adapted to their world, built shelter, and created homes full of life and love. I smiled to myself. I wasn't just living in a house. I was living in history, the secrets within the walls. As I stood outside my house, staring at its ancient beams and sturdy stone walls, I felt a strange sense of connection, like I was a small part of a much bigger story. My curiosity wasn't satisfied yet. If this house had been standing for centuries, what stories were hidden within its walls? Determined to find out, I decided to explore every corner of my home. I started in the attic, climbing up the creaky wooden ladder. Dust filled the air as I pushed open the hatch, and I coughed as the light from my flashlight revealed old wooden beams, cobwebs, and something unexpected. A small, crumbling leather-bound book lay in the corner. My heart raced. Had I just stumbled upon a forgotten secret? I carefully picked it up, brushing off the dust. The pages were yellowed with age, and the handwriting was neat, but old-fashioned. It seemed to be a diary from a woman who had lived in this house centuries ago. November 3rd, 1665. The plague has reached our village. Many have fled, but we remain. I pray our home will protect us. December 12th, 1665. We burn rosemary and lavender in the fire to keep the sickness away. The streets are silent now. Only the church bell tolls, March 1st, 1666. Spring has come at last, and the sickness is fading. We have survived. This house has been our refuge, our guardian. I shivered. The Great Plague of 1665, one of the worst in England's history, had reached this very village. This house had been more than a home. It had been a shield against danger, just as the thick stone walls were meant to be. Eager to uncover more, I turned the pages, reading about the family's joys and struggles. One entry spoke of a great storm that had almost torn the roof off. Another told of soldiers marching through the village during the English Civil War. Each story made me feel as if I were stepping back in time, witnessing the past through the eyes of those who had lived here before me. I closed the diary and held it against my chest. This house wasn't just bricks and timber. It was alive with history, filled with whispers of the past. From that day on, I saw my home differently. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind rattling the windows, felt like echoes of those who had lived here before. And as I sat once again by the fire, I smiled, knowing that I too was now part of its story. Echoes of the past. The old diary changed everything for me. Suddenly my home wasn't just a place where I lived. It was a witness to history. I imagined the woman who had written those words sitting in the same room where I now sat, her candle flickering in the dim light. Fear and hope mingling in her heart. The next morning I decided to explore more. If the attic held secrets, what about the rest of the house? I started in the living room, running my fingers along the wooden beams. The house had stood through wars, plagues, and centuries of change. But how much of that history was still hidden? That's when I noticed something strange. The wooden floor near the fireplace felt different. A hollow sound when I tapped it. My heart pounded with excitement as I knelt down and carefully pried up a loose floorboard. Beneath it, tucked away in the darkness, was a small wooden box. I hesitated for a moment before lifting the lid. Inside, wrapped in a piece of cloth, was a delicate silver key and a folded piece of parchment. My hands trembled as I opened the fragile paper. The ink was faded, but the words were still clear. To whoever finds this, know that this house keeps its secrets well. If you seek the truth, follow the crest above the door. I stood up quickly and rushed to the front of the house. Above the wooden door, carved into the beam, was an old family crest. I had never thought much about it before, but now it felt like a clue, a piece of a puzzle left behind for someone to solve. I traced my fingers over the crest, feeling for anything unusual. Then, just as I was about to give up, my finger caught on something, a small, almost invisible notch. I pressed it, and to my amazement, a hidden compartment in the wooden beam slid open. Inside was another note, this one even older. The edges were crumbling, but I could still make out the date, 1453. My breath caught in my throat. This house had stood even longer than I had thought. The note was short, but its words sent a shiver down my spine. The treasure is safe, hidden where the house meets the earth. May it never fall into the wrong hands. A treasure hidden beneath the house? My mind raced with possibilities. What could it be? A chest of gold? A forgotten heirloom? Or perhaps something even more mysterious? I had started this journey simply wondering about the history of English houses. But now, I was in the middle of a real-life mystery, one buried in the very foundation of my own home. And I was determined to uncover the truth. The secret beneath the house. My heart pounded as I reread the note. The treasure is safe, hidden where the house meets the earth. What did that mean? The cellar? The foundation? I grabbed a flashlight and made my way to the cellar. It was dark and cool, with thick stone walls that smelled of damp earth. The wooden beams overhead were old, worn smooth by time. I had never really explored down here, just used it for storage. But now, every corner seemed filled with possibility. I began tapping the walls and floor, listening for a hollow sound, just like I had done with the floorboard in the living room. For a long time, nothing happened. I was beginning to think I had misunderstood the clue when... Thud. My breath caught. That sounded different. I tapped again. Definitely hollow. Excitement surged through me as I grabbed a crowbar and carefully pried at the stones in the floor. After a few minutes of effort, one of the large stones loosened. I pushed it aside and shone my flashlight into the opening. Beneath the stone was a small wooden chest. its surface darkened with age. I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing. What if this was something dangerous or cursed? I shook my head at my own imagination. This isn't a storybook, it's real life. I reached in, lifted the chest, and set it on the ground. My hands trembled as I used the silver key from the attic to unlock it. The latch clicked, and slowly I opened the lid. Inside, wrapped in a faded velvet cloth, was a bundle of old coins, a few pieces of jewelry, and, most intriguing of all, a stack of yellowed letters tied with a ribbon. My fingers tingled as I picked one up and unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant, but the ink had faded in places. I leaned in to read. April 14th, 1453. To my dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, then my worst fears have come true. The war has turned against us, and I must flee before the soldiers come. I have hidden our family's last treasures here, in hopes that one day they may be found by someone who will honor our name. This house is all that remains of what we built together. I pray that, even in my absence, it will stand strong, just as our love has. If fate is kind, we shall meet again. If not, know that you were my greatest joy. Yours, forever, Thomas. I stared at the letter, my heart aching for a love story lost to time. Who were Thomas and Eleanor? What had happened to them? Had Eleanor ever found this letter, or had it remained hidden for centuries, waiting for me to uncover it? I carefully examined the rest of the letters, piecing together their story. Thomas had been a nobleman, caught in the Wars of the Roses, a conflict that had torn England apart in the 15th century. He had hidden his family's last possessions in the house before fleeing for his life. There was no way to know if he had ever returned. As I sat there in the dim cellar, the weight of history pressed down on me. This house had stood through plagues, wars, and centuries of change, carrying the secrets of those who had lived within its walls. And now, I was part of that story. I carefully rewrapped the treasures and placed them back in the chest. They didn't belong to me. Not really. They belonged to the house, to its past. But I would keep the letters. Their story deserved to be remembered. That night, as I lay in bed, I listened to the creaks and whispers of my old house with new ears. I no longer heard just the sounds of wood and stone. I heard the echoes of those who had come before me, and I knew, deep down, that I would never look at my home the same way again.